All right, let's jump into this. I just wanted to get everybody's kind of reflections on the past year, and it's obviously been as Mike says, it's sucked. So, but I want to hear, like, I'll get Rob to start. And Rob, like, what are some of the challenges that you had to deal with? But also, are there any sort of silver linings around this where you're like, okay, I learned something from that, or we can build off of this? And do you have your sort of worst and your best?
Um, the silver linings is I think I have a greater appreciation for friends and family. People I work with, those types of things. Greater appreciation for some social aspects of life that have been taken away from us, so to speak. And you know, what I've learned is, just deal with adversity and the unknown as best as possible. Reaffirming you put people first, as Mike stated before, regarding whether it's business or anything else, and just trying to deal with things as best you can, and stay calm, and just have a presence of mind, not to panic, because if you panic, you just a lot easier to make the wrong decision. So, and I'm sure we've made some mistakes, and I'm sure we've done a lot of things right. It's been an experience, to say the least, as everybody on this Zoom call can, I'm sure, can attest to.
Yeah, and I mean, just even with the economic stuff, you generally manage to keep everybody safe within your company, and just do the best you can there.
Yeah, I mean, regards to, we've had cases, but cases we've had, if it was, either from a patient that tested negative, that was really positive, or somebody very young that adhered to the rules and showed up at work. I mean, we're not drawing bloods or things like that. We're taking temperatures on everybody. We're having forms recorded. You know, doing that twice a day with our staff and with every patient that walks through the door. Sterilizing things, cleaning services coming in to sterilize things, staff sterilizing all equipment after each patient's use, gloves, masks, PPE, doing whatever it is we possibly can do. But, you're going to have your moments, and we've had ours. Minimally, thank God, but we've had them. So you just shut things down in accordance to, what needs to be done.
Yeah, and I mean, are you kind of projecting forward, or are you just kind of staying in the now right now? Are you kind of going?
No, we're
Yeah,
projecting forward. We're
yeah,
projecting, both sides of the coin. A number of our facilities are in New York City, and so if they shut down New York City, what do we do there with regards to whether it's a referral or reassignment of employees, those types of things. Then obviously the economics of that loss of business. What do you do with that? In other areas, so we look at that, and then if the vaccine is successful and New York City starts to open up, and other areas start to open up more, then what is the process moving forward to enhance business, bring it back to where it was pre-COVID, and hopefully beyond. So you look at both sides of the spectrum. Try to be as prepared as you can be. You just don't know what's going to happen. This new, what if there's, God forbid, there's a new strain and the vaccine's not effective? Then what do we do? Because if this thing is mutating, if it mutates to a strain that the vaccine is not effective, what do we do then? Are we starting all over again? So who knows? Hopefully that doesn't occur. But you try to prepare as best you can.
yeah. How about yourself, Mike? I mean, you kind of relayed some stuff to me, some challenges and some down things. But I mean, how are you? Like, you're kind of a leader of a group. Your training group. How are you keeping people up, and how are you drawing some positives from this situation?
Um, my old man used to say often to me, panic slowly. So I think that was pretty good advice. Kind of go away, Tyrone. I feel like I know now what a football feels like, getting kicked all around the paddock. But you know, one thing that's come out of this is that we have to maintain an optimism, because if you're trying to lead your group, you don't want to lead it down a black hole. You need to say, well, you know, greater days are ahead of us. Brighter times are ahead of us, and you know, I think we've come out of this with well, we're not out of it, but we're working through it with resilience that perhaps we didn't realise we had, and you know, understanding when coaches talk about a plan B or a plan C or a plan D, we've had to implement all of that, and under pressure of something like a war against a plague. It makes you appreciate life, the value of life, the gift of life a lot more, especially with one of my top athletes having lost her very best friend and killed a metre in front of her. And she's just still really, really badly suffering from it. That's Rebecca Bennett. And you have to sort of try to put yourself in their shoes and walk a mile with them, and understand when they just cannot come, when they cannot get up, they cannot even get out of the house. You have to understand and empathise and sympathise and what have you. So anyway, but the silver lining is that we are becoming more resilient, and I think that will benefit everybody on and off the track. It'll benefit people when they're coming up to hard times in their job or their career or their academics. So that's kind of like my take on it at the moment. And hopefully, as Rob said, the medical scientists will continue to work to resolve possible future pandemics and come up with a vaccine that will take into account any mutations, any variety of mutations, and there are quite a number at the moment. But apparently, the vaccinations at the moment will nuke all of these mutations. So thank goodness for that. They're heroes.
Yeah, hopefully that mutation thing is not an issue, and people can just get vaccinated, and we'll get through this. And hopefully, I'm hoping optimistically summer for us, but we'll see. Omar, what's your take on like just sports, and as sports is kind of taking it in the nuts here, but you know, and even watching, and I'll get Keith to touch on this, but even watching some of the NFL games, I can't help but think that the playoffs are going to be impacted by positive tests, or you know people missing games and all that, and how's that going to play out, and are people being careful, and but how's it what do you see in terms of like how sports have happened at the collegiate level, and how it's been sort of a mishmash of some participation, no participation?
Yeah, it's so I left. I was unemployed a week prior to the pandemic starting, which was kind of funny. So kind of getting secondhand information from colleagues. And then recently, actually not recently, a couple months now, I started teaching chemistry at De La Salle High School, which is a pretty good high school that they have I guess a hybrid schedule where 50% of the school comes for school for 2 days, the other 50% comes for 2 days, and then based on county rules, the school is probably 60% athletes. So they have one of the top football programs in the country every year. Basketball's pretty good. They're very sports focused. And so just seeing the psychological, so teaching chemistry and having a lot of those kids in there, seeing the psychological effects that had on them being in the classroom, and the role we play in helping them be optimistic and helping them understand that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And then I also got on staff at Cal State East Bay, which is up the road from me. So I'm an assistant coach in strength and conditioning for men's basketball. And so you got that group of kids that are intercollegiate kids that live on campus, and there's no one else on campus outside of the athletes. And so you see how that affects them psychologically. So I think the guy that I work for, Brian Rooney, does a great job. He's extremely optimistic, and I think he does a great job of making sure he keeps the guys understanding to be present and understanding that, like I said, there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. But, you can tell in some of the sessions that we have, I got to train them out in the soccer field. We couldn't be indoors. And so we had 6 huge stations. And so we try to make the best of it for them and try to get them to understand that, if anything, we can work on getting better since we're going to be here. And since we're going to be here together, let's just, try to keep them as focused as possible. And again, as always, bring the energy so that we can help them be at a better place. And then, for us, it was just not only COVID, but also, the social injustice. So it's just so many different things these young people have to deal with that it became such an opportunity, I think, for leaders to really step in and provide that guidance to some of our intercollegiate athletes. The CCAA decided to not sponsor any sports next year, so we're still going to come back, and there's an opportunity to play after March. But that's pending based on a lot of factors that are out of our control, and that could not happen. So, just trying to get them to understand, like, this is a redshirt year for you guys. Let's get you better. Let's get you stronger. Let's work on certain things that are going to help you get better. And my boss is going to introduce Energy Bus to the kids next semester. So we're going to really delve into Energy Bus and really help them understand about, the impact that they also have and the responsibility they have as intercollegiate athletes as well. So, it's just not, I think we focus a lot on the developing holistically the athlete, and I think that's important. When you focus solely on the sport, then they think it's about the sport, and it's really not. It's about them developing holistically and understanding that at some point they're going to have more responsibility in their life. And so how can we help them be better with that? But that's my take. I think the optimism here is that similar, I think, to what Rob is, that I think we do have to remain optimistic in this process. And as leaders, we do have to help the people we serve, help them be at a better place, because they're dealing with a lot more. And so, I think as leaders, we owe them that much.
Do you think, I just look at my own kids, and they're like 16, 14, and 8, and I'm going like, okay, how are you guys doing? Like, we have conversations with them. Do you think kids in general are being pretty resilient during this time, Omar?
Well, I have a 8 and 11-year-old, 2 girls, and they're doing great. But I think it all has to do with circumstance. I mean, I have families in Southern California that you got multifamilies living together, and that might not be the best situation for them. Whereas, like, my girls, they have their own room. We set up a whole station for them. They have everything they need and space. Whereas maybe some kids that might not have that. But I do think there's an opportunity for innovation. I think teachers have really been really good about that innovation piece and really trying to bring that to the forefront and seeing how we can maneuver through the challenges that we have. But as far as kids, my kids, I'm surprised how great my kids are doing. But that's because, I have a weight room here. They can work out. They have their bikes we can ride around. We have a backspace they can go and play. They have everything they need, but that's not, and we try to help them understand that that's not every kid. And some of their friends, when they talk to them on Zoom, they get to discuss those things and those challenges as well. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. We try to bring that up as well too. Like, we have a gym and different things that they can do. But yeah, it could be tough for some families.
Yeah.
Keith, I wanted to get you on. I haven't seen you for a while, Keith. So I wanted to ask you about even just the pro sports situation. And like, I'm not really watching, I'll be honest. Like, I see that NBA is on and I'm like, and then, obviously watch some of the NFL games and maybe a few of the college games and all that. But, what do you see happening over the next 6 months? Is it going to get better? Or are we going to see still some, limited action, or just sort of blunted?
Honestly, I think you're going to, and hey, everybody, how are you? I think it's going to be a lot like this weekend where, the Browns are on their team plane getting ready to take off to go on a away trip, and they find out a guy's positive and his contact tracer eliminates an entire position group. And there's going to be several things like that happen. And honestly, it's kind of a miracle the season has gotten as far as it has. And the NFL is just, maybe to their credit, maybe not. They've just been bound and determined that this was going to happen. And the season was going to happen come hell or high water. And they've made whatever, moving games and what have you. And it's worked out. So no games have been canceled yet. So I feel like that's going to continue. And what you could say is a good part for the NFL is that, middle of February, the season's going to end. And the players are going to go away for a while, as they would have anyway. And so they're going to get a breather. And it's just fortunate it's fortunate for the NFL that the pandemic happened when it did, because it didn't take any money out of anyone's pocket in the spring. And as long as they got to the season and were able to hold games, they got the benefit from watching Major League Baseball and the NBA, jump through the hoops they had to jump through to get their seasons in, and they learned a lot. But even back as the beginning of training camp, as we're going through the protocols every day in our facility, you're looking around and everyone's basically making bets on, we won't get to the first game. This thing will get shut down. And it didn't, somehow. So, but the testing every day, when the Players Association kind of demanded that they do the testing every day, and that went through, you thought everyone was much more optimistic that the season was going to happen.
Do you think ultimately the playoffs and the Super Bowl will be decided by positive tests, or, quarantines?
Largely.
Or yeah.
If they can, they say the bubbles aren't going to happen, but I could see once you get to the Super Bowl and you've got that 2-week buffer, usually a team stays where they're at and then goes to the Super Bowl site for that week. I could see them doing one of two things: going to the Super Bowl site immediately to basically quarantine themselves, or waiting to the last minute to go and just treating it as a regular away game to eliminate contact with anyone else. It's going to be interesting to see, but I think, like I said, the Browns today were decimated at wide receiver, and they ended up losing, and that surely had an impact on it.
Do you think there's going to be a combine, or how's that going to work?
I don't think it will. And I honestly think that, in one guy's opinion, that in some ways the sport may be better off if we don't have a combine. They maybe the selection process will rely on some other things.
Yeah, actual film
that aren't 225 bench press reps.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Keith. Good to see
You
you
bet.
again.
You too.
Bob, what do you see? Like, let's talk a bit about the pro sport, because that's a bit of your realm too. But then a college sport, where are we going? We've gone through all this. What are you planning for 2021?
Holy shit. Can I get an easier question, please? I'll take what the fuck is going on for 100? Well, look, this is where you need Jimmy the Greek, the ultimate prognosticator. Look, I'm in LA County, right? Which I don't happily call it that way, but it's like Wuhan Junior. This place is, Friday, they put 6,700 hospital admits in, 14,000 cases a day, up from 4,000 just at the end of November. So, I mean, I don't know. Now here's like, I think Omar was talking about, optimism. Yeah. I mean, whether I'm optimistic or not, it's not the point. I am in a position where I have to plan for 200 more kids coming back in January, repopulating spring sports, no fall sports, and all their glaring brilliance said, well, hey, let's bring the fall sports back and we can have both fall and spring play at the same time. So, finally that ended, right? Okay, well, let's not do that. So that, I mean, the happiest guy in the country at that point, I'm sure. But now I got to bring back 200 more folks, but I got to plan as if that's going to happen and as if that's going to happen January 11th. So I'm in charge of getting all the testing together, getting all the outdoor facilities together. So we have a game soccer field, a practice soccer field, the track, baseball, softball, tennis, how many people can fit out there? Can you fit the whole team? Got to split baseball up into 2 separate places for the first 2 weeks. So our protocol is 2 weeks outdoors training, no shared equipment, no weightlifting, no skills, no nothing, no balls, no bats, no whatever. Second week is potted skills training only, potted weight training only. And the 5th week is come back. The 5th week is, no matter when it is, normal. Full practice, full contact, locker room shared, blah, 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 weight room, everything is, so we can hang in there for 5 weeks. We're okay. But I mean, I don't want an optimism cloud the fact that at some point it's not even, it's about the health of our country. I mean, to think that you have to spend any time getting athletes back is one thing. However, I will say that I think some of the safest places in this country are collegiate campuses. And those campuses in athletics are safer than academics because we can test more, we can pod them, we can quarantine, isolate them. There's so many things that we can do that you can't do for 30,000 other students. I mean, you can't keep track of all of them. We can keep track of in our school, 300. So I tell the athletes, look, am I optimistic? Not necessarily, but I'm going to be prepared, and that happened with men's basketball where, we were told at one point, I mean, this thing goes so wide, right? Once politics and money got involved instead of the science, it just went all shit. So nobody really knows what information's coming and why that information's being sold to you, because everybody has this interest involved, then it becomes red-blue interest, not just public health interest or scientific interest, right? So now you don't really know what's going on, but to the point of being prepared, I get on those private LA County public health phone calls, and where Dr. Barbara Ferrer, who's the head of department, gives her spiel of, what's happening, what to expect, where the protocols are coming from, the edicts from the state. She was saying to us at the end of October, all right, we're going to grant athletics, outside conditioning only, single occupancy in the dormitories, but that's it. And we're not going to say anything till after Thanksgiving. Okay, well, our plan was only for 2 weeks outdoors, but okay, now I have 2 additional weeks to figure out where we're going next. USC and UCLA have a private phone call with her, and within 3 days, the LA Times reports that they're going inside practicing. What the fuck was that all about? Well, we already had my protocols were already set. So the cascade of events happens once you get a date. So with men's basketball, the date was after canceling fall sports, every sport but basketball still starting, I don't even know, December 3rd or something. So, okay, so now we can start the protocol in effect. Well, so now good thing we were ready, because I got my people to call down there and say, this is bullshit. My kids don't want to come back any less or more than UCLA, USA can. You just put them on a phone call and say, yeah, sure, go ahead, while we're just sitting back. So we were ready to go. Anyway, that ended up getting us into the right frame of mind. We are now entering our 15th week with 0 infections, not one. So I would say that they're the only team there, granted. So exposure is not fantastic. Still, go find somebody who has not had an infection yet. Any team, pick one. Golf, tennis, anywhere in the country, it hasn't happened. We've done it. And to your point about, do you think that the Super Bowl will be decided by, whoever's not infected. I say, man, why doesn't Northridge become the national champion, for fuck's sake? I mean, it's like injury, right? I mean, a little different, but we would have beat you if our best receiver didn't have a pulled hamstring or our best quarterback shoulder didn't hurt. Well, that's part of the game, bro. It doesn't take the tarnish off my trophy or my ring, I promise you. So right now we're in good shape there. So I think preparation is what you need to have. If I look across the landscape, and this is really no different than we talked about the last time, which I think was probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, not one place, and Keith will tell you this, and Rob will tell you this, that not one place across the country, pro or collegiate, has had an outbreak and has responded by saying, "Oh, we just don't know how that happened." It's the most unbelievable thing. We did everything we were supposed to do. They went down to the Tiger Bar and Grill and 23 guys came back. Or that 7 guys in the dormitory just happened to see the same 7 girls that they invited off of campus to come on campus and all that. So there's, you have to really violate some of these things. But if you pretty much keep to yourself and keep your things at risk, the campus protocols take care of themselves. I have environmental health and safety. I have an EOC committee, which includes the campus chief of police all the way to, whatever, that goes through looking at the protocols. I submit to them so that they okay it and send it to the president. So we have a lot of checks and balances. And if you do it right, you should be okay. Easy to screw up though. So I think preparation is it. That's the key. We've already seen what's happened. Again, people not following the protocols, not being masked, not being spaced. We had a couple of false positives and how we put those, and good thing that we did, because then we were able to activate the plan. Now, at the very end of the contact trace and everything, we found out that, okay, it wasn't, because we got more tests to show that it was negative. But as we separated these people out, you see how this thing, gets to a spot where you got to pay really close attention. And it's, look, the things that keep you on campus playing are the same things that keep people opting out. It's not easy. It's stressful to come in. Everybody thinks, oh, we're going to come back and play. That's just like that much of it. Yeah, you got to come back and play and eat in your room by yourself. No team meals. You have to, there's so many things involved. You have to get an appointment for the athletic training room, if unless your arm's broken. But all those things are all, making sure we're spaced and in order. So I think it's preparation, not optimism. But at the same time, in LA County, I'm prepared for them to say, at the rate we're seeing right now, we have 0 ICU beds now. We're at 0. And I can see them shutting the whole thing down. It wouldn't surprise me. But should we be able to go ahead and them understand that if there's any place you could do it and not spread, it will be in a collegiate atmosphere and we'll be ready to go.
That's a lot of information there. Anybody have any comments or questions for Bob there? Because he did throw a lot at us and he's kind of in the thick of things.
I have a question for Bob.
Yep.
So does that become institutionally and by county, because your conference is so spread out that, say they shut it down for you guys, does it shut down for the conference, or it's just institutionally?
Well, so Omar, our conference is pretty close quarters, right? So it's not too bad. There's UC Davis. Well, so here's an example, right? UC Davis is in Yolo County. It's close to Sacramento. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that or not, but Yolo County shut down the entire county. So UC Davis stopped playing football, can't play basketball. They're done. That our conference doesn't stop. But if you also remember back early on, the SEC commissioner was like, well, if y'all want to play, you can play. But if you don't, sorry, we're going to play anyway. So he made that clear. And I think that they do things different, but we're still going to play without UC Davis, right? Mm. So, but for the most part, it's a good question, because in our conference is different because we have the California State University schools and the UC schools. Those two systems are separate. And so sometimes they follow different protocols, but our conference came together with game day and conference testing cadences on how and when and how you do it. And, now Cal State Fullerton, we were supposed to play them this weekend. They got hammered. UOP last week, they got hammered. So there was 3 games that we didn't play because of them. That's certainly not going to affect us, but a 14-day quarantine. I mean, I hope I don't have to find out how that works. The 14-day quarantine, that's a killer. I mean, you can't just, take day 15 and go play basketball. I mean, can you imagine doing that in any sport, for crying out loud? So I don't know how that's going to happen yet. And I hope I don't find out. But if they shut down LA County, there'll be a few schools that will be shut down, and the conference may have to make a decision because there's, and some of the other ones aren't in LA County. So we'll have, Long Beach is in that, but Long Beach has been hammered really badly, so they haven't been playing much. But your county is the thing that's going to take care of it. Our county has relied on the state in a couple of areas, but LA County is so big that the state doesn't hold them to the general rules because we're just too big. So they did say though that the question was asked on Thursday. No, the question was asked Wednesday on the call. Are you going to shut down sports? She said, we will not shut them down as long as the state allows it open. But if they do shut it, we will shut it. We can go harder than the state, but we can't do less than the state. So, and then of course, even then, if they say it's okay and the state says it's okay, but the school's president says, I'm not going to put my name on this, it doesn't look good, then we don't play.
So many factors there. I know.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I know Santa Clara too. They men's basketball, because I know their coaching staff, and as well as their strength coach, is that they moved out of Santa Clara and went to Santa Cruz and are living out of hotels right now so they can play games.
Yep.
So that's just
so their Santa Clara County got shut down. They also shut down the 49ers and everybody else there too. Ryan Holloman, their director of sports medicine, was my trainer for men's basketball at NC State. He's a senior associate director in my role now. They bumped him up. He's like Rob. I mean, he's a great athletic trainer and therapist with a strength coach outlook. So we talk all the time. In fact, he helped me with some of my off-campus protocols. So now that's a whole nother story. But they just hired Jay Agabao. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He was running some stuff right down the street from me here. So I was lucky to connect them two, and good for him. He got that job going forward. But there's a couple of places like that. In fact, we're still talking about if they shut down us, do we go to Las Vegas? And play the rest of our game out there.
Hey, has anybody tapped you on the shoulder, Bob, and just said, hey, we got to look at the financials here, and we're going to have to cut, or we're going to have to, nobody's really talked about that yet?
No, because the CARES Act is going to take care of a lot of that money, right? Up to this point, we probably spent, like most schools, anywhere between, 200 and 500 just on a team or two, which is going to be basketball and football. So, it's, who knows how much the CARES Act will cover it, but not one time. In fact, I think those that are for athletics, Derek, they're saying, don't worry about the money. We want to make sure it's safe.
Okay.
So they're saying, okay, we will present it to them so they understand the numbers. And now look, I think that if the conference didn't say no fall sports, I think they would have taken a hard look at testing all those sports, including basketball, and say, okay, that might put us in the whole another spot. But that doesn't mean that, look at UCLA, right? UCLA they come in at this thing at 18.6 in the hole. I'm going to tell you, schools like that, and there's a bunch of them, right? A bunch of them. I think there's only 4 or 5 schools in the United States at the Division I level, Power 5, that is in the black at the end of the year. Texas being one of them. There's not very many at all. Those schools are going to cut sports. They'll have no choice. They'll have no choice. They don't want to cut people. They don't want to cut sports, but you can't cut people and keep the sports. Nothing you do. Look at Stanford. They whacked a bunch of them right off the bat. And frankly, I think the Clemson move was a courageous and absolutely correct move to cut track and field. You got to see that down the way. And that, and that's going to help them a little bit in the long run. I'm not saying that's the only thing they're going to have to cut, but people go, oh man, track and field. You got to look at you got to look at this thing. They bring in $0. Our small track team has 61 people on it, right? So you can imagine what that, you got to test all 61 of them cats. There's nothing you can do. So
Bob, let me ask you this. So you go to the Power 5 conferences, right? You start cutting teams, which on paper, I understand why. And then you have the head coach from Auburn getting paid 30+ million, but they're cutting teams. You see a recipe for disaster there regarding what people are going to be saying or doing, or they'll just accept the cutting of the teams because there's not the money in the budget.
There's nobody in collegiate sports that'll look at it like, wow, that sucks. They all know. I mean, the outside, to the outside, it's going to look bad. And even as people on campus, academics say, well, why do you have, how come you can't get our music department back when you got the men's soccer team back? Well, there's an easy explanation for that. We can't track the music team. That's why. We can't test them all the time. We don't know where they're going, what they're doing. That's part of it. And, not to say that men's soccer, I think I put soccer as an example, but not to say they make any money, but that's not the point, some of these things. But yeah, I mean, look, I think you're right about that. They talk about, and not just hiring those guys, Rob. How about the firing of the guys that they got to pay tons of money to too? Like, they don't give a shit about that. And it's shameful to a degree, but you got to say, well, okay, for that department to be whole, men's, women's, basketball and football have to be whole. We got to get to the bowl games to get that contract in order. That's why MLB was pushing all the way as far as they can to get that, and NBA pushing as far as they can to get that postseason contract to kick in and get the money out of that. So it's, the bowl game is important. And I would think at some of these schools, I've seen the number flash across, up to 90% of the athletic department is funded by football income.
Wow. We'll get Ryan Bant on here to defend track, the existence of track, but certainly this brings up a lot of questions about, the dollars and cents behind a lot of these programs. And I'm even curious how much money is being brought in by these pro sports that don't fill stadiums. And how is that going to affect staffing, resources, salaries, and, if this drags on. But Ryan, I'll let you jump in and save track.
Well, I don't know that I can save track and field without track and field making some decisions to monetize itself through some betting and some grudge match races and doing some more things that they need to do on a regular basis to get some interest in the sport. I find it curious that besides American football, that track and field has the highest participation of any particular athletic discipline in the country, and no one's been able to figure out how to monetize it. There's plenty of ways to monetize the sport, and it's just one of those things where they got to take the gloves off when it comes to gambling and betting and do certain things where it's not necessarily mano a mano, but, whoever gets through the line at this time first, whoever achieves the highest, max velocity gets bonus money. And there's all these other bets that you can roll out there, which have nothing to do with someone losing to someone, but setting a new personal best or PR, a season's best, something like that. And they could allow that betting. It would be money. Now, obviously, collegiately, there's issues there and stuff like that. But one of the things I have a big problem with is like, if we're going to take the gloves off in terms of, amateurism and the athletes being able to market themselves and make money off of their own person, then I also feel like I don't know why the Oklahoma quarterback many years ago who got busted for turning lights on at a car dealership would be illegal and thrown out of campus and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, if the university wants to give that guy a job, wants to pay that guy a job, why are we having a problem with that? And that's one of the ways I think you can fund and finance. The other thing I think is interesting to me is the fact that, we do cut the track and field team, but we don't ask the university's most expensive coaches to take a pay cut or the heads of the universities to take a pay cut. I mean, recently, at my particular school district, they tried to do that to us and it became a very bad PR move on their part. And they eventually paid us our entire contract. But even at a local high school, where you have administrators making hundreds of thousands of jobs and saying, well, what we're going to cut is on coaches' salaries because that's a real big gain. I think in the long term, there are things that you can't continue to do, like you can't continue to ask, Dabo to take a pay cut, but you could probably ask him and make him look like a hero, and then pay him a little bit more money down the line, and say, hey, you can have an opportunity here to make yourself not look like a racist. And you could put your money out here to save the track and field program, which happens to have the majority of non-revenue sport Black men competing. But the fact that that question has never been asked, or the university has never come across that, and that's not just Dabo, but it's all the other places too where that happens to be the case. It's just a really, really bad look, even though it makes dollars and cents down the line. But I also feel like, why is every university spending so much flipping money that they aren't in the black? And let's be honest, most Division I football teams don't make nearly the money that they should, and it's all based on the money that they get from the alumni and the donors, and they're constantly amping up. Like, does Mizzou need $100 million addition to its stadium? Like, does it really need that? Does that really move the bar for the entire University of Missouri? Is it a nice thing to have versus a necessary thing to have? And I think that's where we get problematic. Or like, oh, we need to redo our bookstore that nobody even buys books anymore so it can look like a European airport, and it's like, maybe you don't spend that money on stupid stuff and be a little bit smarter about how you spend and where you spend. And that's where I get frustrated, because the idea of having these sports is for an experience. And obviously basketball, I'm sorry, my dog's going nuts. Isabel, can you go out of the room? For some reason, my dog hates my daughter. I don't know what's going on. They have a rivalry. But anyway, for me, it always makes me scratch my head as into why can't we seem to make money? And then let's be honest, like, the WNBA, like, why does that exist? It doesn't make any money, but it's there because the mission is to improve women's athletics, to do the right thing for women to be competitive and athletic, and so therefore the NBA has made a decision to keep something that doesn't make money at all, but for the mission of equity and all this. And then again, with the Clemson situation, I know that they cut some sports, but they didn't cut some of the other country club sports that they certainly could have. And so the criticism there, as Big Time Bob said, is brave financially, but I also think they could have been braver in other ways by asking some things of their staff or payment for 1 year. Because I believe in my heart of hearts, my fingers crossed, that once we get this vaccine out here, we're going to get back to normal, as much as normal could be from the things that we've learned, that maybe, hey, we don't go back to that because that isn't financially viable. But I think we're going to get close. And so I've had a lot of, I know I'm going on here forever, but I've had a lot of thoughts about this, and it bothers me a lot when the sport, obviously, that I love, that I'm biased to, is getting hacked, when we see all of these other people, like Rob said, a coach for Auburn getting paid $30 million a year, the highest paid government employee for the United States is the Army's football coach. Like, just think about that, right? And I know he brings in money, but it's Army. Like, how many people are paying attention to Army, but yet he's making that kind of money because it necessitates it to find a coach who can coach that program at a Division I level. I get it, but we got to be inventive and creative and think about how we want to move forward financially with this idea of amateurism, and maybe throw that out so that we can attract these athletes. They can make money, they can do the sport, and we can have that program still being, around.
All right. Big Balls Banta brings in race and gender. All right. Who wants to answer to that? Let's blow it wide open here.
Hey, wasn't there, I think, wasn't it Minnesota's wrestling coach that came out, and because they had cut wrestling, even though I think a football coach got a cut in salary, I think it was like $1 million less that he was going to make, or something absurd like that, but they still had to make the cuts and stuff. So I don't know, Bob, maybe uh, are the financial losses that big that even though some of these Power Five people are losing money, that they have to also cut sports?
Well, there's a couple answers to that. First of all, wrestling was an easy one because I think even wrestlers will tell you at some point there will be no wrestling anyway because there's not enough teams. I mean, like if you look at men's volleyball, for example, there's I think 23 teams in the United States in the NCAA. That's it.
Wow.
So, yeah, so wrestling's not far from that. Plus, it's been emaciated a little bit in the way it's viewed because MMA just crushed wrestling a little bit and put more people in. Yeah, now it's you're getting some grapplers out of there, but at the same time, people are going, "Hey, we're not gonna do that." I mean, they absolutely ruined boxing, the MMA. And now you got the crossover that could help a little bit. Still, guys are like, maybe we can do this thing. The other part about the, when there, at least with track, you have men's and women. So you got to make sure you're in the Title IX. So you can't whack a bunch of women's sports without the balance of the university's demographic of females, right? So if your campus is 50% female, then 50% of your athletic department has to be female of your sports, in terms of head count. So that's why track becomes an attractive sport to release because it's hard to do that in other places, right? So money, I think money's part of it, but I mean you can't just not cut somewhere, so you just got to you got to go for it somehow or another. I know this money that goes into football, I mean it's the same old story, right? They bring in a ton of money, the ton of money, and even in the red, that football program runs the softball program, runs the women's and men's tennis program, runs it, so if you don't have a choice there. And Ryan, I would say to you a little bit, if you think about Rob can remember this too. I know, well, some of you can. The USFL, the problem with not getting this big giant weight room, or like you were talking about, Derek, or the Clemson bowling alley and all that bullshit, right? USFL, it's kind of the same thing. Okay, here we're going to cap it, right? And at some point, somebody says, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get the best guys. That happened to be Trump. But then it just blew out the whole thing. Well, so that's what's going to, SECs for sure, right? Okay, let's just keep the spending down. Okay, I agree. And then all of a sudden, your crosstown mate ends up building, a 100-seat amphitheater, 3D, whatever, who knows, right? And you're like, shit, man, if it came down to, and those guys are recruiting the same dude. So if it comes down to that, like, yeah, I'd rather go sit in the theater during my off time. So I'm going over there. So they kind of forced to stay up and keep up with the Joneses. I know it sucks, but you can't explain that to, well, we're doing our best to keep the economy down. And, well, I'm trying to play football so I can play in the end. I don't really care about that.
How important is like alumni support for a sport? And like, say, maybe Clemson doesn't have the same alumni support or political backing as opposed to, say, golf or tennis, or I don't know. But, is that a factor in cutting some of these sports as well? Not just the dollars necessarily?
Well, it's probably more of a factor of them coming back if they do, but they're not asking the alumni. I mean, well, probably not. I would say if there's places that would be listening to the alumni, it would be like Yale Crew. Them cats. First of all, Yale's got the #1 fund in the world going there, financing their whole campus. But I remember I applied for a job there back in 2000 and let me think, 3 or 4. So I had an interview up there. Their indoor crew facility, I mean, then they had like an indoor crew flume. It was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. and you could, put the 4 in, take that out, put the 8 in, take that out, skull boat, put that in. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Oh, there's shitloads of money flying in there. Crew will probably never be cut at Yale under any conditions, I would imagine. But aside from that, I don't know. I mean, I think it was confusing about Stanford. I think the sports they cut, you look at them, you're like sailing. Okay, those sports were endowed, I think, they were already paid for. I'm surprised we haven't heard something about that yet. Like, okay, what did you do with my money I just gave you? The millions I just gave you to run sailing or the other sports. You know, I'm surprised we haven't heard anything about that, honestly.
Yeah, so it's complicated. That seems to be the answer here. Adrian, what are you seeing on the street when you're talking to kids and talking to other coaches? Like, are there any solutions there moving forward? Are people worried? Or are people going to be able to get scholarships? What's going on in what you see?
From from what I'm seeing, a lot of kids are just like you guys just said. A lot of kids are worried about getting a scholarship, worried about just like Keith and I were, excuse me, typing back and forth. Combine. Jay Abigay, I always screw his name. He just took the job at Santa Clara, and he runs. He used to run Sports Academy up in, Thousand Oaks in California.
Yeah, Mama.
Yes. Yeah, it used to be Mama's. Yes. And so Jay and I were talking about it. He's like, yeah, a lot of the Pac-12 guys that opted out were already talking about coming there. And especially like the second tier, third tier guys were talking about, okay, I need to get my, bench up, 40 up, yada, yada, yada. So I can at least get a look, so forth and so on. And so it's like, okay, so is it going to be a trickle down effect? Are they going to have the money for these kids? Are these have the scholarships for the high school kids coming out? The high school that that's a mile up the road from me, they're shut down. But thankfully, I am the speed coach for the gym teacher's kids, so I can get in anytime I want. Thankfully, so but other than that, everybody else is struggling to try to get in. And it's I think just like Coach Alejo said, I think it all comes down to money. No, who's got the backing of it? Who's got the no, I mean, let's be honest. Nike made a ton of money on this. Amazon made a ton of money. Why can't we ask them to fund, to help these kids out? You know what I mean?
Or the U.S. How about the U.S. Olympic Committee?
Yeah, I mean, just like
jumping in on track and field, jumping in on Olympic sports. They always talk about. Where did I see that? Somewhere where. The U.S. Olympic Committee was like, oh, it's too bad those things kind of happen. Like, okay, well, why don't you throw some money at those schools then? If you're saying that we're not feeding you correctly there, if there's any time to now, show us your patriotism, if anything, right?
Right.
But to your point, Adrian, I would say everybody on this call and everybody in our profession should somehow look downstream when this thing ends up, because I do believe that I don't think it'll be cleared up to totally like it was before. I think masks will be around still. The virus is going to be around still. You'll get your immunization or however it works, with your vaccines, but we should be ready when it gets back. What do we do then? Like, is this really what we want to do? And where is the money to be made? Like Adrian was saying right now, where is the money to be made? It wouldn't make crazy sense for somebody to say, you know what, I'm going to get into medical supplies.
Like my question,
I'm going to get into, I'm just saying.
No, but like my question is like Keith
and
I were talking. I'm sorry, Keith and I were talking. Like, say use Texas or Michigan State or Penn State or whatever. A lot of those guys get their speed and stuff from us track guys. So it's like, okay, you're in the NFL. Why can't some of the NFL guys donate $50,000, $100,000 to programs? Let's be honest. The NFL, they pissed me off yesterday because I was just trying to watch the 49er game, and they put it. Oh, we're gonna put it on Amazon Prime. Why the f are you putting the game on Amazon Prime? That makes no effing sense. No. I mean, what would I pay for NFL Network for, you dickheads? Yeah. Anyway, but then of course my roommate, I think I told you guys, he interviewed for the Colts as a sales position. His position obviously got chopped because of COVID. Nobody's in stadiums, and he said, and he made it very bluntly clear. He said they put it on Amazon Prime because they're trying to go for the kids that are walking around with the tablets and the phones. They want them to watch the game on the phones and pay for Amazon Prime. I'm like, dude, they're not watching games on their phones. If these kids are watching games, we all know it. They're at a sports bar or their friend's dorm having a party. Let's be honest.
Keith, what do you think about that?
Well, I think everybody's right. I think the one question I ask, and it goes along with what Ryan said, eventually and Bob, we're going to get back to normal, but what does that look like? Because it's not going to look like the normal we're used to. So this new normal, yeah, how can other sports make money, and how can what do athletic departments look like at that point? I can tell you, after the pandemic happened, after about 6 weeks, the Eagles basically said, there are people that work here that'll never come back to work at this building. They're going to work from home forever. And they realized they didn't need them in the building. And those people didn't necessarily serve a purpose coming to the facility every day. And so, with athletic departments, how does that change in college sports? I know it's going to change the NFL and what the whole landscape of it looks like to a certain degree, but what happens? And to address some of the college stuff, I just sent in the chat. You look at college football staffs now. I mean, when I was in college in the early to mid 90s, it was the football staff, an offensive GA, and a defensive GA, and that was it. And now, I mean, those staff directories are page upon page of analysts and everybody else. So, where can some of these cuts be made that don't have to be, cutting a sport, but the football department doesn't necessarily need 65 analysts?
The question I have, to
really
follow
good
up on
point.
Keith, the question I have to follow up with Keith is these sports that were cut, the university is going to say, you know what, this isn't too bad. We're going to be more profitable. We don't need as much staff regards to medical, strength and conditioning, coaching, etc. if we don't bring these teams back. So is there any feeling out there that these teams that were cut are never going to come back? Bob already mentioned wrestling. Is Clemson going to bring back track and field? Are they going to say, nah, in the new normal, we'll make more money without them due to the financial sheet of less expense?
Oh, we even talked about that with pro sports, Rob. Like, why wouldn't you just, contract people to come in when you need them, and then rather than paying a full year salary, right? Come in for the off-season training. Okay, then go home. Then we don't really need you all during the season, but I mean will like, as a business owner, are you looking at ways where you can provide more efficiencies because of COVID? You're like, wow, we didn't really need those people.
Absolutely. We've done that already. I can tell you this too. It's, as they say, it rolls downhill. So the example Keith just made with the Eagles, if a greater percentage of the people with regards to specific roles can work from home, do you need the same size company real estate that you had when they were there? And so you downsize on your physical plant because people are working from home. So what does that do to the economics of the real estate nationally and landlords? Because that's going to happen. You're going to have all these big firms, financial firms that are going to downsize because people work from home and the light bulb went off. I don't need to rent all this real estate.
I wanted to say, so my wife just got hired at Facebook, and she was over at T-Mobile, and they took her over to Facebook, and they're trying to get to 50% of their entire people working from home. They want to downsize that much. They realize that people are just as effective at home than they are when they come in. They're just paying, they're paying to have people come in. So they gave her the option to permanently work from home, and then they just give her a stipend to have a home office, and then they give her a stipend for some of the stuff that they have, like they gave her a $2,000 stipend, so she got a Peloton, so she can do some exercises at home. But I think who was it? I think, to Keith's point and some of other people's point, I think athletics might have to look at that, especially a lot of these Power 5 conferences that are probably spending recklessly probably on things that might have to look at, okay, we don't need this person coming in. They can work from home. They can do the same job and it'll cost us less. Or to the other point of contracting people, that's going to be tough. If you're having to contract a strength coach or an athletic trainer or staff like that you can just bring them in for their seasons, which would be tough, I think.
Yeah, it's very interesting how this conversation was like, oh, what did you think of 2020 and all that? Now it's like we're talking about financial leanness and being efficient. And is that is that what's going to come of this whole COVID thing? Is like, hey, you either got to make money and you got to do it efficiently, or you're out. Mike Hurst.
The only thing that occurs to me is that there was a time when track meets drew huge audiences, and that would have turned the dollars over and underwritten a lot of programs back in the day. And I don't really know what happened, because football was around then, basketball was around then. I don't understand it, but I think we need to get back to getting people who can really promote a sport. And people more recently in Britain, like Andy Norman, the late Andy Norman, who got things going with British track and field, and it became pretty popular and pretty much paid for itself, and definitely underwrote their own Olympic Committee funding. I don't see why that still can't happen in other countries, and I wished it would happen in my own, in Australia. And the other thing, in terms of the COVID situation and the funding situation, generally speaking, and trying to get lean and mean, is that in track and field coaching, you learn to do that from day one. There's, at my level, there's no money in it. So you work out a way that if you want to stay involved, you'll be productive. You won't ruin your life, hopefully trying to be productive. You'll have a lot of fun, and you'll get some good results, and everybody will be happy. And, yes, the old saying, good preparation precedes good results, or prevents piss poor performance. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. It's the same with, I think, as Bob was saying, you can take from sport and many lessons and apply them to real life situations away from the sports arena, and apply them very successfully. That's how I see things operating at the moment. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
If you want track and field to really make it, what Brian said, from a single person's perspective, you have to market it unbelievably for awareness, and you have to pay the people so that you can persuade them not to enter other sporting venues where they can make a living. You have to make track and field an option as an occupation. If you can do those two things, I think you'd put it back on the map.
Bob, you got any final words here as we kind of close things up? You've had a lot to say, and you made us think.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, I wish I wasn't that informed. I mean, this thing is totally out of my wheelhouse, right? It was 6 months ago. Now it is my wheelhouse. I mean, shit, I wish I was able to spend more time, making somebody run faster, jump high. That's not been the majority of my 7-day-a-week job up to this point. And it is absolutely 7 days a week, because the stuff changes, so quickly. I would just say that, there's an upside to this thing. Like I said before, I think it's, I think it's a little bit like the West Wing, like President Bartlett used to say, what's next? You got to move, man. You got to move to the next thing. It's whatever's crappy about this, that ain't going to go away. What are you going to do now? What are you prepared to do? Right. And I think, there's places for us to look. I mean, if you're, and I don't need to do this now, and just because I just so busy, but if you have time to build a podcast, that is it. You can forget meeting people at clinics anymore for a long time. You say, well, it's going to come back. Okay. What day is that? I don't know what day that is. You can't plan for that. Right. So, whatever you can do, we can do. I would also say that there's been a virtue in me becoming the COVID coordinator for campus and athletics. I met a ton of people on campus in the president's office, including the president, who I would never have had, just by virtue of the reporting lines, would never be able to text them, right? Hey, got a minute? Yeah, sure. And so now that's the virtue of me probably being, valuable. I have another thing that would add on to them instead of, well, I'm going to coach, kids and sports and all that. Like, okay, well, like Rob said, one of the first things Rob said way, way before this was, you better substantiate your job description. Make sure that you're doing what you say you're doing and it's a valuable entity, because you're going to get whacked if at some point they go, we don't need that, and so this is the time where you need to make sure that you've expanded yourself into an area. If you haven't been part of the COVID action plan, the COVID protocol action plan, I would strongly encourage you to get involved. I want to do this. I want to be part of this. Put me in charge of this, X, Y, and Z, whatever, so that you're in that, because that ain't going away for a long time. And I think that's really important. And financially, if this is, you're thinking about how am I going to keep my job and all that, I think you'd say, how much do I have in the bank? That's what you should be saying. Where's your 401k? Where's your Roth? Where's your savings account? Liquid money. I mean, now, I think if people are just like, wow, this is really, job security, I would say a time to really question that. I think it's really a time to question your financial intelligence. That's what I would say. I mean, there's going to be some point where you're going to need it. And, Rob and I are getting close to solely needing it. Right. So, we're doing the math, I'm sure, a little bit right now. At the same time, it's also helpful that I'm able to draw some pensions from MLB and the UC system while still being employed. But I think that financial education's got to be way, way up there right now.
Oh yeah. I just saw, some people posting about, oh, they're paying a strength coach $25,000 a year. Well, don't take that job, right?
Are you kidding me? Like, are we still having that fuck?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fucking eyeball claw. Like, fuck, let me just rip my eyes out so I can't see this fucking post. Like what? Nobody. Of course, I hopped in on that because that's to me, that's like squirrel. Like I don't know why we're still talking about that shit. Oh, we need licensure. So now I got to put the definition of licensure on there. Like, Jesus Christ, that's not anyway. Yes, and I said amen to that. I would say amen to that normally, but now is the time. Like there may be a chance, or even a furlough. That doesn't say you're unemployed. It does say you're not being paid for a certain period of time. So do you even have that pad, right? That's where writing that article for Simply Faster, making a couple $100, all of a sudden it's like, man, maybe that's not a waste of time. You know what I mean? Like, you got to start looking for that kind of shit. Or if you're not in Clemson, South Carolina right now, looking around for the track kids that are still living there, you're out of your mind. Come on, let's go. I'll train you. Especially the good ones. You can still go run in Europe. There's plenty of ways to get you going, man. Come on, let's go. Or let's get you ready to go run track at Utah State or University of Washington or something. Like, they're not training those kids. They're out. They don't come in at all. So
I'm looking forward to your online course on entrepreneurship, Bob. I'll sign up for it. So
not mine. I'll do what I do best, is say, oh, this track thing's a bunch of crap. So Derek Hansen would be happy to answer that question.
Okay, Keith Gray, you had last word. I haven't seen you for a while. Good to see you. So what do you got to say to everybody, and how do we solve this?
Well, first off, it's good to be back. I don't have the same email address anymore, so I didn't see some of the invites, but I'm glad to be back a part of it. I'm not sure. Like Bob said, the minute it stopped being about the science and started being about politics, it was automatically going to take longer. And it has taken longer and probably still will. The question for sports is, how soon is it safe enough to get people back in the stands? Because that ultimately drives so much of all of it, right? If stands had been packed in college sports, for college football at least, this fall, some of those other sports probably don't get cut. TV revenue being what it is still high, but they still rely on, butts being in the seats to pay for wrestling or gymnastics or swimming or what have you. And, hopefully that's going to take care of some of that. I don't think it's going to solve all the problems. And again, some of the solutions have to come from the adults in the room, not letting all these things spiral out of control. The arms wars with the weight rooms and the facilities and the staffs, the sizes. My first year in the NFL, the Eagles had the biggest staff in the NFL. And so it was position coaches and strength coaches. And I think there were 16 of us. The staff I was just on with the Eagles, there were like 60 people. And that's just how much it's grown over the last couple of years. So it's got to be people making the decisions have to draw a line and say, why do we need this? How much do we need? And until that starts happening, I'm afraid some of it won't get fixed.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, thank you all for jumping on. It was a small quality group, and hope to see you soon in 2021. And this, we're not having the same bloody conversation, Bob.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you very much. And Ryan, I'll get you I'll get you all on my podcast. I started a new podcast, like Bob said. I'm listening to Bob already, and let's start talking about some more productive things.
Absolutely, man. All good. Great to see you guys.
Good seeing you guys, man.
Happy holidays and happy New Year too.
Happy New Year, guys. Bye.
You too, guys. Yes, thank you. Take care.